Okay, so NAMI Sacramento, our mission, we help people who live with mental illness, and we help the family members of those people who live with mental illness. Want to help the whole circle of folks whose lives are impacted by that. So this is our mission that we have as an organization. We exist back in the 70s. People were being released from psychiatric facilities with a bottle of pills and sent home with no instructions. So family members didn't know what to do to properly take care and live with their loved ones. So they formed informal support groups and became their own little organizations on their own. And we here in Sacramento at that time are known as the Sacramento Alliance for the Mentally Ill. And in this, we did support and finding out information, because at that time we knew nothing about what was going on with our loved ones. So in 1983, someone went throughout the United States and grabbed up all these various groups and created the National Alliance for Mental Illness. So it started off as a family support group. The family support group model worked, so they created a peer support group model as well. And we have classes for both families and peers, and everything we do is based on lived experience. So you have to be someone who's living in recovery with your mental health to help someone who's still struggling, or you have to be a family member to help a family member. We're a three-tiered organization. We have national that creates our programs and that works on federal legislation. The state level works on state legislation, and then they help the county affiliates. And it's the county affiliates like NAMI Sacramento that actually provides the services in their community. We are a member-based organization. People can join, and there's an open door membership for $5 a year. And it helps to make the organization stronger, and especially with our advocacy efforts. And then we do support groups and classes and presentations, and then we advocate is what we do for our communities. There are no cost for any of our services. We provide them at no cost, so there's no barrier for people to get in for our groups and classes. This is why we do what we do. Now, these stats are pre-pandemic, so they've no doubt increased since then. Now, when I talk about a mental health condition, we talk about anything, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, and at any level, whether it's mild, moderate, or severe. This second stat put up is the 1 in 25 adults lives with a serious mental illness. This is someone who typically is living with something like schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, major depressive disorder, to the extent where they have trouble with relationships, have trouble maintaining employment, education, and things like that. So that's the most serious level, and there's at least 10 million people throughout the United States who are living with a serious mental illness. And for your teams, this is the stat that you need to be aware of, is that half of all the chronic mental illnesses begin by age of 14 and 3/4 by the age of 24. So this is the age when you're starting to really see these things start to take effect on people, and they start off mild and they just get stronger as people get older. A lot of folks find out either through experimentation or, well, through experimentation that drinking and or illegal drugs can sometimes temporarily resolve their mental health condition. The problem is the long term is that's poisoning their bodies and minds. So there's a big co-occurring relationship between addiction disorders and mental health problems. And so sometimes that makes it harder to help somebody when they're dealing with an addiction issue on top of their mental health problem. A lot of the youth in our juvenile justice system has a mental illness. This particular stat is heartbreaking. The average delay between being 8 to 10 years. And this is the time when people are becoming homeless, running away from home, dropping out of school, losing employment, losing relationships in some cases with their family members, or they ending up in jail from that 8 to 10 year period of time. And then they have to make it harder for them to rebuild their lives after that intervention starts taking effect. And you see the dropout rate is high for people who are experiencing a mental health issue. And this is all untreated. They're not getting treatment for that. And so they're not able to maintain their school, whether it be problems with the grades, problems with relationships with teachers or their fellow students. And again, with the criminal justice problem that we're having in our schools. We have a big problem with people who die by suicide. 90% of those have an underlying mental illness, most often depression and or anxiety. And suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. Fortunately, it is preventable, but it has to be addressed. So stigma is a pervasive problem in our society throughout the world, actually. This is a centuries-old problem, and it's going to take a lot of work to try to get rid of stigma, especially here in our country. We have a lot of people who don't believe still to this day that mental illness is real. And so people are, they say you're faking it or what have you, and not trying hard enough. So people in some cases can even self-stigmatize. I had this problem with myself. For a long time, I would not tell anybody about the fact that I lived with depression. And so, because I felt bad about myself, that a lot of things were my fault, and took this on my own. And so people view stigma as a feeling of shame and judgment from someone else, or that shame and judgment comes from within. The people who live with a mental health condition are often dealing with bullying and discrimination. In school, there's a lot of bullying that goes on, and so we advocate for a lot for anti-bullying efforts, trying to find a place to make it so it's safe for the kids being bullied can be at school still, and not be discriminated against. And this one surprises a lot of people. They don't think of mental health as being a disability, but when your mental health affects your ability to maintain employment or maintain your schooling, it is a cause of disability. And most of the people who aren't being treated is because they choose not to. They don't feel like they can, they don't feel like, because of the stigma, they don't want to admit it, that they have this disability. Excuse me. And so they will not try to get help. In some cases, it's a matter of access to services. There's no mental health treatments in their neighborhoods, in their regions, or they can't afford treatment in their area. Again, with the statistic here about the delay of intervention between the onset of symptoms being 8 to 10 years. But there is hope. There is always hope. A lot of people who, when they get to that point in suicide, they feel like they've given up. There's no hope. They just want to get rid of the pain. But we're here to tell you that we have people who have survived their attempts and have gone on to live happy, successful lives because they're able to regain that hope. And we want to make sure that people aren't losing that. So a lot of it about resolving stigma comes about changing your attitudes and changing how you refer to people, changing your language when you're talking about mental health conditions. We want people to be respectful, just like you would talk about anybody else's health condition. Don't let misconceptions go unchallenged when you see or hear them. Sometimes people don't realize what they're doing or what they're saying as being insulting or negative, and they need to be challenged so they can figure out that what they're doing is not working for the people that they're talking about. See the person and not the condition. We always want to use person-first language. I will tell you that I personally still struggle with this one after all these years. I've been working really hard at changing my own language about how I talk about individuals and how I talk about myself. So this one is not easy, but the earlier we can get people started on this first person language, the easier it'll be for folks.
Hey, David, could you share an example? David, could you share an example of that? Like, what would be an example of first language of a first person language versus the other way of talking about it?
Yeah, I'll get that in another slide or two.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. And make sure you offer support if you think someone's having trouble. Don't let someone go if you think someone's in pain. Don't let them go on and be living in pain if you think there's something you can do to help them and help pull them out. Avoid labels. The labels are tough for people to live with. Crazy is probably worldwide the most widely used label. And it's one that we use intermixed with many different things. Sometimes we're not even talking about people, we're just talking about situations. But it is a negative word for people, maybe people living with a mental illness. All of these words have a very negative connotation, and nobody wants to hear that. They're all bullying terms, they're labels that nobody wants to be called. And nobody wants to be a victim. And oftentimes people are judged to be a victim of their mental illness, and that's not a powerful way of talking about someone who's living with a medical condition. So using more respectful language, instead of saying she's bipolar, you say she's someone who lives with bipolar disorder. And this is the person-first language that I was mentioning earlier. Instead of saying the mentally ill, when you're talking about a group of individuals or a class of individuals, the people who live with a mental illness or a mental health condition. Now, there are some people out there who don't even like the term mental illness. You'll find that there's a lot of opinions about various terms and words that people use when they're in this mental health community, in this discussion. I myself, I'm trying to convert over to brain health, but a lot of people aren't used to that one yet. I'm trying to get rid of the word mental as a whole and just talk about our brain, because our brain is the organ in our body, just like our heart or liver or kidneys. So that's just another term that's out there, using a brain health condition. People live with a brain health condition. And instead of saying committed suicide, and we don't like committed suicide because it implies that a person had a choice. And so we say died by suicide, because at that point, choice has really been taken away from a person because they've lost hope. And like I said earlier, they just want the pain to go away. So we don't say committed suicide because we don't want them to think, we don't want people to think that the person had a choice anymore, because they're really not feeling that choice anymore. Now, one of the things that helps as far as getting rid of the stigma is publicly advocating for improvements to our mental health system, our brain health system, and improving the conditions that we are living in nowadays. So one of the first things we talk about is getting more counselors on campus. Right now, I've seen laws in the state trying to make it so that there's one counselor for every 600 students, which still seems awfully low to me, but it's better than the one counselor for every 1,000 students that a lot of school districts are currently living with. We advocate for anti-bullying programs, and these are real anti-bullying programs where the individual being bullied can still feel safe on campus after intervention. Sometimes I've heard about bullying programs where the bully was never really changed. Nothing happened. And so there needs to be a real change for that bully to change their hearts and their minds, and so that way that the individuals being bullied can still feel safe on campus. And then training for all staff on campus, not just the teachers. Oftentimes it's just the teachers who are getting this sort of thing, but students also will view people in the facilities or administration department as being safe adults that they want to talk to. And so those adults also need mental health training as well. And then building working relationships with families is very important. In some cases, families, they don't see it. The symptoms can be slow to manifest, and so their child has been perfectly healthy for all of their life that they've seen them for 14, 15, 16 years, and they don't see the changes and don't want to hear the changes should they first be exposed to them. Having that working relationship with the family, though, helps in the long run with that individual, with that child, because you're incorporating the parents in the healing process. And sometimes the parents also will need to change their own actions, their own words. And so working with the families builds a better long-term healthy relationship, and more likely that that child that we're worried about will get into treatment and get the help that they need. Now, talking with a trusted adult, for a kid, ideally the parent is a trusted adult. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. I talked with a young man last year who came out to his parents about his anxiety and wanted to get help. And his dad replied with that only therapy is for girls. And that instantly dad became not a trusted adult anymore. And so sometimes it's going to end up being a doctor, could be someone at school, could be a faith leader, anybody that the child is going to view as a trusted adult, an aunt, an uncle, or something like that. But it needs to be an adult, needs to get involved. You saw from the stats earlier that there's actually a lot of people who are impacted by mental health issues. And so you are not alone. So that's one thing that's very important to realize, is that there's plenty of people out there who you can rely on, at least for support, if not for information and help with yours or your loved one's mental health condition. And educate yourself about mental illness. There's many different conditions out there, many different forms of treatment that are available out there. And so the more information that you have, the better. And then forgive yourself. A lot of people will blame themselves for their problems, for their mental health conditions, and blame becomes an impediment towards treatment. And we want people to get the help, and so just forgive yourself and move on. Again, with the education, inform yourself now. Don't wait until somebody comes out to you about their mental health issue. There's plenty of sites. NAMI.org has information on its website. There's other websites out there that have information about mental illness, the different conditions, and the different forms of treatment that are available. So the earlier you inform yourself, then you're more ready to go should someone come out to you about their mental health problems. Don't assign blame or find fault. That just leads to guilt, and again, that's an impediment to getting treatment. Getting yourself in the right frame of mind for treatment. Sometimes the situations can lead to awkward silence, and people don't like awkward silence. They get nervous, and they tend to fill that with words, and they're not thinking necessarily about what it is they're saying. So sometimes it's better to wait and make sure the individual who's come out to you about their mental health, A, is done talking, but B, make sure that you are going to reply with the well-thought words that you have considered, and are not going to say something to make the situation worse. Reach out to other people and families again. There's plenty of people who are sharing this experience out there in the world. And sometimes it's not just the kids' health that we're concerned with. The kids could be perfectly healthy and not have any mental health issue, but at home they have a sibling or a parent who has a mental health issue, and that's still impacting the child's life, impacting the child, their success at school or something like that. So that's just another way of looking at this view, is to see what is going on at the children's home life as well. If you join NAMI and become a member, you will get emails about different legislative efforts, advocacy efforts people can get involved with, hear about different forms of treatment research options that are available out there, and help make the organization strong. NAMI is the #1 grassroots organization in the United States dealing with mental illness. Normalizing the conversation. Make it so people can talk about their mental health, their brain health, just like any other part of their body. I should be able to talk about my depression as much as anything else, as my liver, my kidneys. For me personally, my story started when I was about 12 with epilepsy. And I at first didn't talk about it because I didn't know what it was, and nobody was talking about epilepsy back then. And so, and I first thought it was kind of neat, and then I got kind of scared with it later as the seizures got stronger. And then once I got my diagnosis, I felt okay to talk about it. And at the same time, I got diagnosed with depression. And while I felt okay to talk about epilepsy, I never felt okay to talk about depression until I joined NAMI about 11 years ago. So I was several decades of where I was silent about my depression. I didn't tell anybody about it. And that was wrong. It did not do me any good, especially considering both were part of my brain, and both are the same part of my brain, and were treated pretty much identically. So we're trying to normalize that so people are comfortable talking about their mental health issues, just like any other part of their body. And one thing I'd referred to earlier, there is no physical or mental health, there is only health. By having mental health, we've allowed the health providers to create a second class of health services, and the health services for mental health has never been as robust as it is for physical health. I could walk out of my house today, trip and break my leg, be taken to the hospital, treated, put in a cast, and home by this evening. Or I could walk out and have a psychotic breakdown, and maybe I would get treatment. I might not. I might end up in jail. I might end up just roaming. Might have ended up in a psychiatric hospital for several days. So there's just not the same level of services. And so by getting rid of that mental health designation, I think it will help get rid of some of the stigma against mental illness, but it'll also force our medical service providers to provide parity of services. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate your help with this. Appreciate what you're going to be doing in the community. I do want to turn this over to my colleague, HaeLeigh Sinerius, who is going to share her personal story of what life was like for her as a kid. HaeLeigh?
Hi, guys. Can you hear me loud and clear? Awesome. Okay, so hi, my name is HaeLeigh. I am 25 years old. I practice mindfulness and enjoy being social with family and friends. I attended high school locally at Valley Christian Academy. I have a love for the ocean and lived on the Central Coast for 5 years before returning to my hometown of Sacramento. I love to be out in nature, swimming, reading, and doing yoga. I have my own business. I work with a local psychiatric hospital, and I work with NAMI. In high school, my mental health would fluctuate. I would get overwhelming feelings out of nowhere and distinctly remember hearing laughter cheerleading at a basketball game, even though no one was behind me. I'd write off these occurrences as having a strong sixth sense. I balanced honor roll, theater, and playing multiple sports. I also dealt with the social pressure of being left out, gossiped about, and bullied. This took a toll on my mental health and caused me to look outside of myself for acceptance. Learning how to process the inevitability of not being liked continues to come from growth. At 23 years old, I had my first manic episode and a psychotic break. What led to me getting sick was working a job that put me under physical and mental stress, avoiding my emotions, and not knowing how to feel safe in my body. I would try to be perfect and do all the right things to cope, but it felt like I could never catch my breath. When I was manic, I did things such as accused family members of abuse, broke the lease of my house, quit my job, abandoned my beloved cat at the airport, and attempted to take my own life. I couldn't sleep for weeks and became very paranoid of my roommates, parents, and friends. I didn't seek help because at first everything seemed crystal clear, and I deeply believed my delusions, hallucinations, and intrusive thoughts. Friends in law enforcement thought I was on drugs by the way my symptoms were presenting themselves. I ended up going to the ER and was then admitted to a psychiatric hospital where I was diagnosed with bipolar 1. At first, I believed that medication was poison and I would die if I were to take it. This is not uncommon. It wasn't until court-mandated treatment and encouraging notes from my mom that I allowed myself to receive care and would comply with taking medication. I would not have the quality of life that I do now if it weren't for medication. If you can imagine what psychosis feels like, it's not knowing the difference between what's real and what the mind is imagining. Hallucinations appeared when I would look at something and it would take a different form. Nothing would appear like a mirage, but faces, car headlights, mirrors, and windows would distort into frightful things. During psychosis, your nervous system feels fried from sleep deprivation. Your body shakes and you can't wind down. I would stay up all night pacing the halls of the hospital, lost in my mind. Mania is behaving in a way that is so out of character, and then having to repair the damage done to those relationships that were affected by the way you were behaving. I've been stigmatized as less intelligent because of mental illness. I've been spoken to overtly slowly and have been given looks of uneasiness and fear. Have you ever felt like other people view being mentally ill as a character flaw? I had no clue what my initial diagnosis meant, for all I knew relating to bipolar disorder was stigma, like being moody. I grieved the life of simplicity I felt I lost when I came to the realization this is a lifelong illness that I'd have to manage. Acceptance played an important part in my recovery, as well as the understanding bipolar disorder is a stress-related illness, so it's important to keep my stress levels low. My relationship with my parents became closer as I moved in with them, and I met great friends at inpatient treatment who I still talk to for daily support via group text. Social situations were overwhelming at first. I looked for connection in NAMI support groups, volunteer work, and enjoyed the intimacy of one-on-one time. Getting on a sleep schedule, taking medication, therapy, doing research on and educating myself on bipolar disorder, learning consistency through a Reiki and meditation practice, and exercising for mental health were all instrumental in my recovery. My journaling practice is also a great outlet. I wrote a list of hobbies I enjoyed before I was struggling with depression. It helped remind me of what brings me joy. If it weren't for the wellness plan I have in place, I wouldn't be able to live my dreams of being a spiritual entrepreneur. What helped me get out of the darkness and hopelessness of what felt like my life falling apart was my faith that there must be a greater purpose. I had a lot of ups and downs, but every little thing I did compounded over time, and I started to move past my all or nothing thinking. The mental fog started to lift, and the constant memories of being ill subsided. It's important I stick to a routine. I thrive and can be my most creative when I give myself a framework of structure. I still love to be spontaneous, but am better at checking myself if I'm being impulsive. I rebuilt self-confidence and self-trust through being consistent and doing a lot of things scared at first. Giving myself time to feel like myself again taught me patience and how to be gentle with myself. I now know my warning signs for when I'm getting sick, have a care team behind me, and have faith that I can live a life of balance. For me, success is waking up every day and getting to do something I love and prioritizing my healing. I started my own Reiki business and can financially support myself. Reiki is a Japanese stress reduction technique that balances the body, mind, and spirit. I started a Reiki program at a psychiatric hospital and get to teach patients. My business will be expanding to another psychiatric hospital in the area. I partnered with a crystal boutique and hold group Reiki sessions, which is another dream come true. I have one-on-one clients and get to help those with mental illness outside of a hospital setting. I work with NAMI and I speak with Ending the Silence. I'm able to travel, spend more time with family, and pour into myself extensively. I take lots of courses in my areas of interest and have found a way to utilize my natural gifts as a career. I'm able to invest in various healing sessions and energy work. I get to have slow, productive mornings where I don't have to rush off to do a job just for the paycheck. I've started a meetup group with a friend to discuss interests like spirituality. I have goals of creating an app, writing a book, and having a family. I have plans to get my own apartment this summer and am proud of my independence. I look forward to growing my business, traveling out of the country, and fighting stigma surrounding those with mental illness by talking to legislators and my community. I am living a life I once dreamed, have received the continued healing I prayed for, and have found new levels of compassion in myself. Thank you.
Thank you, HaeLeigh. At this point in time, we're open to any questions that anybody might have about the presentations.
HaeLeigh, thank you so much for sharing your personal experience, and I really appreciated also hearing all the wellness practices you've integrated into your life. That was super helpful and just really terrific to hear. Yeah, very powerful story, as Christina mentioned in the chat. And David, thank you so much for your overview of NAMI and all the kind of helpful ways we need. I think what you're really helping us do is kind of reframe mental health and how we think about it, and just looking at it, as you mentioned, like from the point of view of physical health and is integrated into our lives. So really appreciate it. I know that the folks at Seer Health are under a time crunch. They're needing to do a presentation on how to go about invoicing the center for the pop-up work. So unfortunately, we're going to have to move on. We will place this recorded session on the Youth Forward website. I'm sorry, the Youth Forward YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel that holds the presentations from this series. I'll be sending you a link to that as soon as we get the video uploaded. I'll also be going to be asking David to share his slides that we'll send out to you. And, hopefully we'll also have more opportunities to work with NAMI going forward.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thanks so much. And just one other thing before we move on, I'm going to put our little survey we've put out to